Yes. Majdi, you can come to the microphone if you like that.
Yeah, I think, can you hear me? Yeah, I think my voice is good enough. So just clarification. Roger mentioned 700,000 secured. What are these 700,000? Or to be secured?
I'll let Roger speak to it. It's the net new per capita funding, but...
Right.
So, Majdi, that investment fund is really the call to action around the dollar per capita across the region. So with the municipalities and the regional municipality that we're working towards $1 million, they deserve a lot of credit for having come to the table very quickly and to support the agenda. So what's happening with that fund is, so we struck the board in March of 2010, right after the 2009 report to the community in the fall of 2009. And so in the early days, that money was used to quietly sustain a couple of things that were going on. And in the most recent round of funding, we've been meeting with all of the municipalities and the region around this fund. And in fact, we're leading a conversation across the region about how funding might happen in the future. But importantly, in the tail end of this year's distribution is where that $20,000 that Heather mentioned came from the private sector, along with the 30 that was invested by the private sector to begin work at other than the large organizations, to start to channel some money into perhaps what I'll badly describe as mid-career organizations that want a lift, they're ready and want to go, and a lot of very powerful organic activity that's on the ground that we've come to know very well. And so there wants to be more and more investment into that part of our creative community to, again, foster and enable and build capacity around what we all love.
So the 700,000, which is going to be soon $1 million, are new monies that came to the sector starting last year and will continue to come every year.
So that's the goal, and because what the call to action included was us also working in the private sector to try and gain up towards $1 million. And also because we learned in the creative enterprise agenda that we were underfunded by the province and the region, that we also would, as a community, continue to make overtures toward them as well to get additional investment.
So how many years that fund has been coming? Last year and this year? 2 years in a row now?
It's 2 years running, correct.
2 years. So those 700,000 for 2 years have been going. I would have loved to see a chart to see where those 700, like I know they went to the anchor organizations of the region, but is it published anywhere, the list, who got what?
Yes, it's included in staff reports at all of the municipalities and at the region. That's public information.
Okay.
So let me just explain that along that path, you can imagine this is a startup. I mean, it's brand new. In the first years, staff at the municipality had the duty of distributing those funds because we were not ready. Last year, we were engaged in a conversation around staff, or with staff across the region, and had concluded at the tail end of that conversation that this next year, we would be included even further so that more monies could be channeled, both as we raise them in the private sector and with the province and the feds, towards activities that I know, for instance, you're interested in.
No, I just like there is something not adding up in my mind about the 20 and 30,000, like 50,000, and then 700 or million. Like there's 700 and million, and we're talking about 50,000 for 59 applications. It's just not adding up in my mind. Like I'm not sure where that investment is going. So
the 50,000 was what we drove specifically. The other allocations had already been, for the most part, again, channeled. I expect that to continue to change, Majdi, and all of you, for all intents and purposes. It becomes a matter of, as we develop the plan and garner more investment income, is when we'll be able to change the dynamics even further. And that's what we're at work at, absolutely.
Yes.
I was just wondering, can
Yes.
I was just wondering if you could clarify the CEEO's role in the funding decisions that are going to be made with the cities in the region, and how it might tie into how the councils are going to be voting. Does that make sense?
Yes, I'm just trying to think of when the councils are voting, which I don't know that information. Each municipality is different, and we're in the conversation stages with them on that process. We don't have a defined process per se in terms of how we're going to be engaging in allocating those funds.
Hi, it's Gus from Quartz Lab.
Hi, Gus.
Hi, how are you? I didn't want to yell. Some of the stuff that you showed were soft services that you could be offering some of the creative enterprises that are in the region. I'm curious when you would be ready to start rolling out some of that.
I would envision, ideally we can get some traction on defining what those are within the next 4 to 6 weeks.
Okay.
And, the first one, for example, in a soft way is the speed dating 101 on the
Right.
grant stuff. We have lots of ideas. We can start actioning stuff. What we'd like to do first is get a quick and dirty input on some priorities that might help inform it.
Right.
And I would envision that we're in a situation come January, we can start to do that.
Okay, thanks.
And even with the group benefits, that's something where we're hoping to get that defined and announced before the year end.
Okay. I guess it was just, it seemed like something that could be a force multiplier for getting more communication going in the region also for arts by being able to be a place to offer or enable these kinds of soft skills. So that's why I brought it up.
Absolutely. And can you be more specific in terms of how you're defining soft skills?
I'm not soft services, not like helping us find a new space, or if we were looking for one, that'd be a hard specific thing. But the speed intro dating thing that you're talking about, the mentoring, the consultation on good bookkeeping, not necessarily taking on the role of being a bookkeeper, but having that kind of the stuff for grants and all that.
Yeah, some of that's been happening directly over the last 7 months, and as I said, our challenge right now is just the volume of the need and getting to everybody as quickly as we can to help figure out how to navigate. So the efficiencies are going to come when we can do a little bit more of that group interaction and then follow up individually. We could probably start it a little bit sooner in December. I'm anticipating that it's going to get really busy. Everybody always gets really busy in December for some reason. We could there was a notion that we would do that not as fulsome speed dating in December, and we erred on the side of doing a really big one as opposed to a small one. But if there was an articulated need, even right now, if we find what comes back in that survey, if there's an articulated need of a couple of things that we could do really quickly, then we'll do it.
I think quickly and good enough is better than large and perfect.
Yeah,
so I encourage you to think of stuff that you could pass the word out that we could as organizations facilitate to enable this kind of stuff. So,
okay,
great.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thanks. Oh, hang on. Oh, I got a waving hand in the back. Yes.
Okay, I want to congratulate whoever came up with this idea of giving away money to support the arts. That's great. Now, I want to pretend for a minute. Suppose I'm a young, which is not, I'm pretending. Suppose I'm a young artist with lots of creativity. My brain does not think the way you presented that information. I really don't know what you're talking about.
Okay.
But I think I know you have money and you want to give it to me. So I don't have any money, I'm starving, I'm creative, I'm talented, I'm by myself or with a few friends. How are you going to help me?
We're first and foremost, we need to find you, or you need to find us. And we need to look at these cases in some respects on both on an individual basis and on a large-scale basis to figure out how we can engage you into the larger process, if you will. I know that sounds like an airy-fairy thing. We're not necessarily about giving out money for the sake of giving out money. So we have to figure out that group that you're speaking to. We have to figure out how to best invest in that entity. And that's the type of thing when we talk about risk, the strategic projects that we want to invest in with the new money that we get in the door. And I'm making this up, and you might hold me to it, but I'm just making it up. You know, we might say, once we get more money coming in the door and we've done 2 or 3 different initiatives, we might say, you know what, this particular pocket, we just want to give it away for the sake of giving it away, and this is the kind of criteria or lack of criteria that will go around it, and it's for pure exploration or pure seed funding to help a number of individuals like yourself. The other thing that I'll say is, although it may not be yourself, you might just be giving an example, but the other thing that I would say is what would be part of what the mandate is to figure out a way where we can take the resources and services and make them available to you, but find a way to make it easy for you to tap into them. And a perfect example is the portal or the website. So not everybody, and I'll be the first one to admit it, I'm not the one who's going to be uploading the information and working in HTML or whatever and doing that kind of stuff online. And there's always going to be groups of people like myself who aren't going to be the ones that are doing that or artists that aren't going to be either have the tools or the equipment or the time or the wherewithal to populate a website. So that's the type of service that we would provide, where we would work with you and say, do you have a website? Do you have a way to get your message out there? Do you want to get your message out there? And how can we create either a turnkey tool that's really easy for you to use, or that we've got an in-house service where we're providing that service to you? And again, I'll make it up, but let's say it's once a month, you want help populating your website, you want help building a website, you want help getting online sales on your website, then we're going to provide that service.
So I think on the point, there's a collective responsibility here as well. We're obviously at work trying to manifest an investment program that's going to grow and build capacity in the sector. We're doing that, and if, you know, because the future prosperity of the area and work for generations to come, I think depends on us being very ambitious about that agenda right now. So much so that I think the evidence is that the conversation that's been going on for sort of 3.5 or 4 years, you would see deeply embedded in the City of Kitchener's economic development strategies, which Rod Regier announced this week. Never before have you heard about creative and early stage industries being the fundamental thing that Kitchener is going to rely on for their prosperity. That's not a conversation that had happened previously. So what's happening in the overall strategy is the more we're able to animate the streets and advance that agenda and call attention to this place as a place and a center of creativity, so that we not only get workers and knowledge here that can and find those bold and undiscovered ideas to drive jobs in the area, but that done by you as making a contribution to that animation and us as a creative place to be, will build audience. And audience, if you are as creative as you say, will provide the opportunity for you to sell your art or whatever it is that you happen to produce. I don't know you. So it's all about that. Growing capacity, building audience, and providing opportunity.
It
had all the artists in it, and you just click through the pages.
yeah.
Sometimes it doesn't help to have it on a computer. The computer crashes.
Okay, so you're looking for a tangible copy?
Yeah.
Sure, I think that's a great idea. Happy to do that. We've got yes, we've got that directory online right now. We're using it. It's on the tourism site, and we're working with Marilyn Scott still in terms of continuing to populate that. But I hear you in terms of a physical output, and I think it's a great idea. Yep. Yes, in the dark.
Two-part question. Firstly, I'm wondering if it's your intent to remain publicly funded, even in part, or if you intend to become either self-sufficient or more reliant on private sector funding. And that's the first part. Secondly, then, if you are planning on becoming more self-reliant, what's your proposed timeline for that transition? And if you will remain publicly funded, how would you account for the discord, I'll say, between your operational costs and what's going directly into the sector?
The absolute intention is to secure significant incremental private sector funding and funding from other sources, both the feds and the province. There's a commitment at a baseline level from the municipalities in the region to the organization. As we all know, that's which is fantastic because that's what's helped to get us going. And that is something that, as we all know, these budgets are reviewed on an annual basis. But the intention is to secure that incremental funding.
So I would say that this is a partnership. My hope, and it's always council's prerogative, is that it remains a three-way investment into the welfare of the community. And I say that because there's as much responsibility on government to make this investment for the welfare of their citizenry. You know, we're talking about prosperity and us being able to provide for ourselves, and so I don't see that falling away. It's nothing that I would ever suggest. We'll incrementally, as Heather says, you know, work at the province, the feds, and the private sector. And I don't think I understood the latter part of your question about the distribution of operations versus something there. I don't know that we answered that for you, and I don't think I understood it.
Basically, just there has been some criticism that I'm know you're aware of about the relatively high operational costs. Basically, the amount of public funding that the organization received compared to what's actually gone to the sector. And I realize this is still young. I'm just wondering about your forecast.
Can I ask you what you think the organization receives to operate?
I don't remember numbers offhand. There were figures that came out a while back, like it was received from Trillium, from the region, from the municipalities, and then the 50,000 pay.
Okay, so let's be clear that all of the dollar per capita or the sustainability investment funds that we had asked for are all invested in the creative sector and will continue to be manipulated in a way to hit the priorities that we're talking about, some of you in the room. And there's a small contribution that comes toward the operational cost of the organization. But again, it's only a portion of what the organization needs. So the municipalities, the private sector, and the province and the feds all contribute to that as well. Now, part of that, so I don't know what number you heard, the largest numbers by far are in the sector. They're going to be invested in, you know, the creative endeavor. And part of what you have to understand that happens inside the organization is work that Robin and Heather do are actually being put into the sector as well. Administratively, there's a very, very small component because they're using their talent and other things to actually do work. So it's actually, and I'm happy to talk to you, and we can look at those numbers, but it's not, I don't think what you've heard or perhaps I would understand. So I hope that helps. But
it says 250,000 in operations versus what, $1 million in investment, which is a very reasonable, that's a minimal operating cost for what the amount invested.
Right.
Did I read that correctly? It says somewhere 250K.
That we're trying to raise.
Yeah, that's new money.
On top of what the operation of the organization now is.
Right, so the 250 is something we got to raise to operate ourselves.
Right.
The $1 million that you saw there is on top of the 700,000. So we're stretching, we're working to stretch that to $1.7 million, which is when the dynamics change, Masty. Right? And then we want to keep that revenue sustained. And at the same time as we build out the organization, you heard Heather talk about sustainable revenues. We're going to find some ways to have some lines of business that actually have returns that we can put back in, so we're not always cap in hand. So we're going to work at demonstrating that we've got capability and capacity and continue to grow that $1.7 million, because our aspirations about what we can possibly do are much greater than the money we have at hand, right? So we got to find a way to change that. And I want to make clear as well, since I should have said it in my opening remarks, I mentioned the date of September 24th, 2009. That was the report to the community on creative enterprise. We declared that we had no interest in any previously funded programs, grants, or otherwise that pre-existed, and that they remained the responsibility and perhaps the property of the area municipalities and so on. We have not touched a single program. Anything we're talking about here is all net new.
So if I may say, from my knowledge of the community and how it's operating and how it's working, the $1 million that you talked about from the beginning is what this arts community needs. I'll tell you from now, get that $1 million into the arts community on top of the 700 that silently these people need them, and the sector will thrive.
Agree.
So this is why we believe in what you guys are doing. We see that there is a vision, there is numbers that are that make sense and are studied, and that's what we need. And we are all, as artists, willing to work with you and support you and keep pushing to get that vision implemented. All the gossip that's going around is because of inclarity, because of ways that this message is not being projected loud and clear to everyone.
Well, thank you, because I think that was our suspicion why we wanted to get together today. But I'm also going to tell you that it's the passion that you have and others have that keeps me as a volunteer and 20 others of us as volunteers on that board going. I mean, the heavy lifting that we're doing is completely at our own investment as well. And we've nothing more that we want to do but succeed in this agenda. It's going to take some time. If you think of a startup, no startup that's become successful, whether it's Sandvine or anybody else, does that in 7 months. It's going to take us a couple of years to do this yet. I mean, till we come to some fruition. We've got great aspirations in the next 18 months to drive that agenda further, but to refine it and embed it as something that is a working model that can reproduce that kind of activity every year, you would understand, takes time to build. And I know that from my own personal life and experiences. So we need that kind of understanding and patience, but in the meantime, stuff's going to happen.
Whoops, sorry, okay, right there, yes, sir.
How do individuals or small groups make sure they're on your database so the communication can start?
info@creativeenterprise.ca, or we've got business cards out at the front, the reception table, and you can phone us, any one of us, is a start.
So, and that's a plea I'm going to make, actually, because Heather told you the numbers. There's only, as we sort of get things together, 250 people or 260 people in that database right now. That's impossible for this kind of a community across 543,000 people. That database and how we communicate to that database has everything to do with also succeeding in the agenda. We really need you to build that network with us, to find out who should be there. If you're not there, you need to be there, and you need to get your friends and colleagues or some of your investors or patrons to get on there as well, because this dialogue needs to be brought up and big and in front of the whole region. So help us there.
Yes, and then I know there's another, I'm sorry, I know there's another one in the back. We'll do the one in the front right here. I've got this gentleman here. Yes.
One of the Regional Arts Council had a bi-weekly email blast that brought everybody up to date with what's going on. That disappeared. Did we really need to have that back? Are you considering that?
Yes, I think I actually mentioned it earlier that it's actually starting. We did a shout out for it in our newsletter last week. And so as soon as you get us the stuff, we'll get it out there. What we also need to be cognizant of is how we're getting it out into what groups in terms of all the new privacy laws and all that kind of stuff. So
Can I also say, though,
And interestingly enough, we're doing that too. So we do have Rose Bendix, who's working with us now, who basically has, there's two things we're doing. One is, and I welcome anyone who tells me that it exists and to tell me to stop doing what we're doing. But I have not been able to get my hands on sort of a real detailed spreadsheet, or for lack of a better word, directory of everything that's going on. Oh, did I? Oh, everything that's going on in the region. So we've got Rose on contract working with us, and she's basically going through not only online information and trying to compile it into one centralized database of everything, but also all of those sort of innocuous bits and pieces of information, whether they're flyers, brochures. Unfortunately, she gets clippings from me all the time. I've been saving them up for several months. And even when you read sort of like briefings that happen in the record or in papers and little snippets of things that just aren't happening all the time. So we're trying to put that together and to build it out and make it as comprehensive as we can, because we know that the breadth and depth of what's going on here is huge. And way at the back, oh, I'm sorry, I'll come back to you because you've already had a question, so we'll do this right here, thank you.
This is about risk, and I'm gonna ask you what levels of risk, or what risk do you think you have to the organization right now? And to back that up, playing off the fact that your sign fell off and stuck by tape. The organization seems to be a bit stuck by tape and stuck together. You've several times commented that you don't have the capacity, even within the organization itself, to do the work you're planning to do. You're struggling with that. You're struggling with the 8x10 cell right now that you're in. I'm getting a message that this thing is too big for what you're doing. I'm wondering what your idea is of what the biggest risk is to your organization. And because you've mentioned the one gentleman that you'd be able to somehow work with an emerging arts organization at the same time you're securing $1 million. That's a huge scope. Yeah. And scope and scale is massive in this this enterprise right now. How are you going to manage that? And where do you see your greatest risk or your weak points?
Well, I think you've identified our weak points. And when I speak about, the challenges, I mean, this is just the nature of a beast for a startup. So I'm not complaining and I'm not begrudging. And in part, I'm trying to share for you create a visual picture of the reality that we're dealing with. It's a startup. It's new. When you start day one, you don't have a pencil, you don't have a pen, you don't have a computer, you don't have an IT department, all those different things. We're bringing that together and we're sorting it out. So from an infrastructure standpoint, we're getting there. I think that for the resources that we've had in the last 7 months, that we've actually pushed this forward quite a bit in terms of a lot of activities that we've moved forward. In terms of Robin and Mary have just been on board for the last month, and it makes a huge difference to have that, to allow me to focus more energies in terms of going out and getting more investment for the sector, which I want to spend more time on, and I will spend more time on. So I don't have a perfect answer for your question yet, because we're sorting it through. The relationships that we have and dialogue that we have with partners in the community. So as I mentioned, getting in sync with CTT and tourism, getting in sync with the economic development departments in the region. As you know, probably from your workings, having 4 municipal governments and really active and energetic community, there's a lot of dialogue and a lot of effort that is important to have to move things forward because of the collaboration that we want to have, and we want to do it right. So it takes time. I know from my colleagues in the community and the conversations we have with different departments and entities, that we're moving forward and making ongoing progress. I think the risk will identify itself when we can't have that dialogue and those partnerships and those relationships to move the beast forward. And Roger, I'm sure you have.
So as a board chair, I'll just add something to that, and that is that we're threatened by the economic instability that is in the world. And a complete inability for people to come to consensus on issues, and that's whether it's in North America or whether it's in Europe and in the Eurozone. It has untold effect on everything that happens, and certainly the availability of investment. Having said that, we're in the midst, in this community, of morphing from one economy to another, and it's not uncommon for us. It's been our legacy over time. I've spoken on this topic before, whether it's in the very early years when it was textiles and so on, going to rubber, going to automotive, going to technology. Schneider's closing, as I think Ken McLaughlin said in the paper, is evidence that an era of 100 years has now closed. 100 years ago is when this area brought hydro up because steam couldn't be fueled by coal because it was too expensive and unreliable out of Pennsylvania, and so they did something about it. That's what this agenda is right now. And that's why I said what I did about these things and what we're talking about being embedded in economic development strategies. You're seeing the evidence of how we're going to morph from one technology or from one economy to another. What we have in our favor is two things. One is that we are designated to grow in the places to grow things. So whether we think or not, and some people would deny this, we're going to 750,000 people. We're ahead of that curve already. And so the want to have people come that can make a contribution to the agenda, to all of who you are, and to economic prosperity is the intersection of creative endeavor. Whether it's art and culture as you would define it, or creative endeavor and digital media and other things. That intersection is going to get very strong. Science, technology, art, etc. So the people are coming. And the other thing is that Ontario in the creative age defines us as only one of 3 communities that hold the promise to morph economies. Ourselves, along with Guelph, Toronto, and Ottawa. So when you've got that kind of expectation given to you, it's a two-way street. Okay? If for instance the province, in this case, defines the area and by discovery through the Rotman School of Business and Management and so on, indicates that the area holds that kind of creative promise for another economy, then building out that infrastructure is something that you have to invest in, and you have to stay the plan. And so I believe that our public sector partners, and as we gather our private sector partners together, and together work with the province and the feds, that we will enable that agenda. It's tricky. It's unruly right now. The ground is shifting all over the place. But the other greatest risk is if we fracture. If we fracture, this ain't going to happen. It'll go away so fast. The investment funds will go away so fast. You just won't believe it. And I can tell you that because I'm the one that actually is in those council chambers and speaking to Finance Committee and with Heather leading a conversation across the region with the region enabling that as well about how we are going to get from today to tomorrow. So I'm not saying that we should not be candid because we need the input, we need frank dialogue, but as a community we need to do this together. And so we're going to be unhappy with each other sometimes. I mean, Heather and I have a deal that it's complete candor. So, and that's good as long as we're respectful. Because there are things that we're going to miss or that we should do and so on and so forth. But creative people are good at kind of making it happen. You can work through that. So that's a risk.
Oh yeah, Robin, okay, back there, yes? You, sir, yes.
Okay, this is very simple. So I read about it in the paper. I called you up. You told me what it was. I did it. I heard about this meeting through you. Wow. I came. And all that is spectacular. It happened like that. I hope you can keep up the pace. This is just one person. I don't know what the hell happened to the rest of you. But anyway, so now this is an update meeting. Is the one in December at the School of Architecture meeting number 2 update, more, or is it a repeat of this one? And I hope it's a continuation of updates, and I hope you keep doing them. So if you could, here's my suggestion. or you're going to see it in the paper to remind you, but it's going to happen, and it's just a continual update. Because if we know that you're there for us, we will come. I'm telling you, this room will be full, and there'll be so many questions you won't know what to do with them all.
That's great.
But we don't need the money, we just need each other. And we need somebody like you guys to bring us together. So if you don't, then I don't think any of us will take the initiative to do that because we're stuck in this world of comedy. So I hope I'll see you next week.
Yes.
I'll bring friends.
Terrific, thank you. So I need you guys to help inform the updates that will happen. I guess we'll maybe see from the RSVP list that we get for the December event what percentage will be consistent with today and what will be new. We'll post all this. It will be an evolution of the discussion, an ongoing evolution. But feel free to email and say, do you know what? There's a bunch of us, we really don't understand this. Could you just go over it again? Or clarify this or whatever. And even to the point where if you come to a meeting and you go, we know that you guys are doing, you know, this particular activity in 2 months or 3 months from now, something's changed in the region and there's a momentum happening over here. Could you just maybe refocus over here or something? Like, feel free, anything you want to say. And then what I want to be careful though is of being just a dead horse repeating and repeating and repeating. But sometimes the repetition is good for things really sink in. But we do intend to do them, as I said, on a monthly basis, and we'll do them as long as they're relevant. And I would like to get to the point where we can say it's sort of every first Wednesday, 4:30 to 6:30, and we're trying to get to that standardized thing. Roger and I were actually just talking today, sort of that set-to-set kind of thing, like, and maybe it's just 5 to 7 or a smaller window or a different window frame. But what I'm also sensitive to is rotating them around the region and not necessarily sort of the Kitchener, Waterloo, Cambridge locations, but out into the townships as well. So any feedback on that is welcome too. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I can see you. Yeah.
You had the $50,000 that went out, and there were 59 applicants, and it looks like about 10 people got it. So the other 49 people that applied are getting nothing. Are you going to do this again, or how soon will you do it?
Okay. There were 12 people that got it, and there were 11 organizations, if you would, and 1 individual artist. And the reason there was only 1 individual artist is there wasn't a whole lot of individual artists that apply. And that's okay. It was really quick when we got the word out and everything. In terms of the other applicants, this was a program that was specifically, the criteria was, tell us how you will use this investment to drive sustainable funds. More than 1/3 of the applicants that we received did not address that criteria. No conversation or mention of how it would help to drive sustainable funds for their activity. And then, so that just sort of takes them out of the conversation in itself. But many of the people who did not receive funding were in dialogue with. And we are intending on doing, not all of them though, and we hope to get to them, or if they're interested to call us and we'll have that conversation. We definitely want to do it again, and it will be dependent upon us getting new money and or identified sustainability funds from the municipalities, the same way that Kitchener put the 20,000 towards it and we matched it and exceeded it. We are hoping that that will happen and perhaps on a broader level around the region, and then we'll do it again. And it may not be the same criteria, though. I will say that that worked for that particular moment. We may find that when we're ready to go out with another investment program, that there's a different set of criteria that's important for that point in time. Yes.
First of all, I just want to say I think there's something really exciting happening here. Having read The Rise of the Creative Class, which is a really good book to read, I think it's
happening right here. However, I also think like the artist back there, because I'm an artist, I don't understand some of your language.
Okay.
What do you mean by driving sustainable funds? So if I want to apply,
Okay.
I need to understand what you mean
Yeah.
by that.
And it's interesting, that was part of the conversation we had when we put the application out. And it's a good learning for us when we get the applications, as it is for anyone who's funding or investing, because it gives you a bit of a benchmark or barometer in terms of reading the applications. So in terms of sustainable funds, we mean, and I can say it probably 2 or 3 different ways, and hopefully one will stick. You get ongoing money coming in. So it's like, you put $10 into your bank account, and the interest that's generated from the bank is 1%. So you're getting every month or whatever, you're getting those extra pennies onto your investment. So it's about if there's something that you can do that's going to generate ongoing revenue for you, which is probably a conversation we could have. I'm happy to talk with you one-on-one, and maybe I can understand what you do and give you a tangible example of how that might have worked. Majdi, let me just check to see if there's anyone else before we go back to you. Robin, is there anyone in the back? There's 2, but I can... Okay, right there. Yes.
For people who aren't at the meeting, or for sort of greater clarity, I think it would be useful if you if you don't already have this, to have the mission and the various things that you're doing, actually like on your website, or so that people could go to it and they'd see what you're doing, so that every month or every how often you have this meeting, then you don't have to kind of say it all over again.
Yeah.
Because somebody could say, you can say, well, we've got these 3 initiatives here.
Yeah.
And so let me just tell you what we're doing on this one.
Okay.
Because there's a lot of information
Yeah.
that we read or heard.
Yeah.
And if we had that to be able to look at in a kind of ordered way, I think for everybody.
Thanks.
It's really useful.
I think it is on the website, but it's obviously, this presentation, all but for a couple tweaks, has been on the website for a while now. But what I think is a better way to do it then is to kind of pull it out into little bites, because I know I'm the same, like you've got lots of documents and you got to drill down and read the whole thing. So I think that's a good idea, Rebecca, and I'll do some segmentation that makes it really easy for people to read, as opposed to a link. And then behind there was another one, right? Yes, right there.
First of all, my apologies for my outburst earlier. As a long-time arts policy, I've been astonished to see the arts and culture put in as something that the city actually wants and is making something good. That's a huge thing. So my congratulations to whoever was involved in that. In the early years, while we put the policy together in the city of Hamilton, one of the conversations we had then was about it's all about organizations, it's all about big boxes. Again, time and again, the conversation here is using the vocabulary, which is very common, which is talking about organizations, and occasionally there's a talk about individual artists. When it comes to doing this kind of development, the individual artists are the resource that if it can be broken through to find a way to get us regulated part of this thing, there's all kinds of energy, all kinds of new ideas, all kinds of new economic growth to be made there. I think there's something well worth working on just for its own sake, so that it doesn't fall through the cracks again and again and again.
Thank you. That's a good idea. I do have is there another question? Because I have an example that I wanted to share that might help with your question. But is there another question before I do that? Right. Yes, Patty?
I think my concern might be when I look at your PowerPoint and your strategic planning, they're all catchphrases for business. And we're always told as theater people or as artists that we need to think more like business. But I'm concerned that your group has enough artistic input, because for all of the delegations and the meetings and the committees, Majdi, underfunded, created a festival that people are still talking about in Canada, across Canada, and across the ocean. And so regardless of what sort of people believe we should be doing or should know about, we just keep doing freaking art, right? Because that's what we do. And I think a division between what you believe we need and what we actually need. Because what I see up there is a lot of very business-oriented stuff. The bottom line is most of the art in Kitchener is pretty amazing. We just need an audience that will sustain it, and we won't need grants, and we won't need all the things that we need now. The audience for me is the biggest issue.
Thank you, Patty, and I get what you're saying, and I guess my response to that is that audience is pretty much the number one priority. It's 50% of the work effort. When you read the business things or you read the strat plan, the number one priority is connecting audiences. When I talk about using technology to enable the sector and the database that's at 250 people, well, shame on us, because it's got to be better. And so it's the marriage between the two. And it's not lost on me in terms of your notion around what do the artists need, and it's always going to be that tension. And we'll keep working through the tension. And part of and I hear, maybe I will endeavor to find words and ways to share information that isn't confusing or lost or a different language. Part of this presentation is part of presentations that I have with private sector. So part of the dialogue of what we're trying to do, and it's coming out in an upcoming article with the Chamber of Commerce, the KW Chamber of Commerce, and thanks to them and Art for asking us to write an article about the creative sector. And it's partly trying to change the dialogue and the appreciation for these artistic endeavors and to bridge that gap between business and the arts. And there's a lot of work that we're going to do in that area. So the example that I wanted to give to make it tangible of a application for the investment fund that really resonated, and again, if this doesn't work, then let's have another conversation. Quartz Lab, and Gus is here, just had a great example. So I'm sure most of you are familiar with Quartz Lab. I don't even want to describe it, Gus, because I know I won't do it justice, but...
We're a not-for-profit makerspace that's member-supported, and we provide a community and access to tools and equipment for our members that have 24-hour, 7-day-a-week access. Okay, good soundbite. So, their request, if you don't mind me sharing this, we've sort of synopsized it anyway, if that's a word, on the website, was for $6,000 to get a laser cutter. And because their assessment was that laser cutter would help drive membership and it would provide a real stated need to the community in terms of what their not-for-profit does. However, laser cutters are typically around $40,000 or $50,000 in North America. But these guys were able to source one over in China for $4,000 and $2,000 in shipping. So the application that they presented to us was very clearly articulated in terms of this laser cutter is going to help us drive membership. That membership is going to help to really offset the cost of that laser cutter. It will probably be repaid, not repaid to us, but generate that revenue back to the organization over the course of 2 years, help them to be of more value to the community. And that was important because it had a broad impact to the community. And would basically help them to become more self-sustaining from a revenue standpoint for their organization. So that might not have worked very well, but we'll talk. Yes, right there, Rebecca.
I just want to make a comment again to someone's comment about and Roger's about the Kitchener Economic Development Plan, which puts arts and culture at the sort of center of its being. And I just wanted to say that the last, this is my 3rd year on the Economic Development Advisory Committee, and probably you may be surprised and may not know, but actually I represent arts and culture
No, not at all, not at all. And I will say, in recognition of Waterloo and Cambridge as well, that Waterloo has just received, Marlene will know better than I, but the provincial funding for their cultural plan, which really does embed creativity and culture into every decision that they make for that region as well. And Cambridge, as we know, or probably know, has their cultural plan as well. So it is right across the region, and again, everyone's at different stages of development, but it's great to see that it is embedded within all of the municipalities, and also within, we know New Hamburg and North Dumfries and Wilmot, they're all part of the discussions that we're having around the creative sector as well. Tracy, yes, hi. For those of you, everybody should probably know Tracy Desjardins, the General Manager of the Regional Tourism.
So, again, sorry I'm late. I thought it was important for me to be here. I'm kind of an outsider watching this. I live here now. I lived in Niagara. I worked in Toronto. I worked for the province, and I've been all over Ontario. And one of the things that drew me here and made me take the position for tourism for the region was I was extremely excited about the creativity and the cultural offerings that the region had. In fact, I was blown away. I had no idea we had this much talent and this much product in the area. So much so that when I started in November, one of the first FAM tours I did for all frontline hoteliers and visitor centers was to theme our tour on arts and culture. And it was only for like about a day, but we didn't even touch the tip of the iceberg. And we brought all the media with us, and that was one of our first partnerships, Heather. We garnered like 600,000 in media that we didn't have to spend on, just from, and it was all about just a little bit of the arts and culture and creativity in this region. So I envision with this organization and CTT and others moving on that the way to tell our story here for the region is you guys are so critically important to tell it in a very creative way. You log on to the website, it's not just your typical website. You're going to hear artists, you're going to see artists, you're going to go to virtual art galleries, you're going to see animation and music, all fed from individual artists. And that's going to start telling our story, whether it's on a tourism website or a regional website. So personally, I'm just saying that I'm very excited about working with a bunch of groups to tell the story of the Waterloo region in a very creative way. And I think we can be leaders in Canada on that. So I'm just going to leave it at that note. So thank you.
Any more questions? Yes. Yeah.
The speed dating thing that you referred to earlier, I'm wondering if is there any thought to having a similar kind of thing, or maybe this is already part of what you're talking about, where arts organizations and individual artists would have an opportunity to do that kind of thing with business people in the community. Because I know as a representative of a small arts organization, I feel like there's this abyss between me and all the corporate types out there who might be interested in supporting arts and culture in the region. So
yeah, I totally agree. And one of the things that I've been thinking about on that is kind of a stepping stone in a way. So to have some, probably not speed dating, but to set up, maybe it's a one-day conference and bring some knowledge and information and expertise around sponsorship. So there's a number of different budgets you can tap into with the private sector, whether it's community or philanthropy and all that kind of stuff, but sponsorship as well. And so I was notionally thinking that I'd like to do that sponsorship one first, and also help enable people with the terminology and the language of, because you don't want to have two people sitting across the table from each other and you're meeting each other for the first time and you're talking apples and oranges. So try and help that conversation first, in an ideal world, to help develop some packages or work with people. And I think this is something that we could do, which is a sort of training session, very quick and dirty, where we bring in some expertise and some people that can help action. So here's your property, here's your activity. How can we turn that into a 1 or 2 page sponsorship type package or something that's going to resonate with the private sector, and then help you match it up with the private sector. So that's one way to do it. If we were to do the speed dating thing, it would be really getting a bunch of friendlies in the room that are going to say, here's what I need to hear from you, here's why that doesn't work for me. But what I'd like to do is get the engagement up first before we have that level of interaction. So that's just a thinking on it. I think that might be it. Any more questions? Oh, way in the back, yes. Very good observation, and I was thinking the same thing. And again, it comes back to a limited database, but we are on Facebook and Twitter, and we do have relationships into those sectors, but nowhere near deep enough. We also are working with, I know that Gabriel is here, and Martin de Groot is here, who are in, and there's a number of different Maxwell's Music House, as well as, I'm going to forget and I can't remember what they are, organizations. I know Empty Space does it, I won't name everybody, who are working at developing and already doing it, getting into the education system with what they're doing. So that's part of the process, and education is definitely on the list in terms of figuring out how we can get more people out. The other part of that is in terms of when I talked a little bit earlier about a lot of niche or siloed groups within the community, and this is a general observation from me trying to figure out the community. There's not a lot of cross-pollination widely. I know Majdi's had a lot of success with Impact with the universities, but cross-pollination with university audiences into the communities. Part of that's just the nature of the beast geographically, and so we need to figure out ways to increase that intersection. Again, part of the audience development, and Robin and I were actually looking at some stuff today in terms of Wilfrid Laurier and Waterloo and Conestoga in terms of how we can create stronger ties with them. We do it on an academic level, we do it on a strategic level, but we're not doing it on the yet across the board in terms of the audience development level. Oh, the symphony. Yes, Roger. I know I won't name them all because there are some people that are doing it. And again, it's just taking it to the next level to really get a broader audience. From, ages 3 to 93 is the goal.
I have a question, or
yes.
A comment.
Yeah.
My name's Darren. I think you don't see young faces here today because it's my understanding that the average Canadian artist makes about $6,000 to $8,000 a year. You guys probably know this better than I do. So consequently, they're all working 2 or 3 other jobs to be able to live. And so they can't show up at 4:30 here on a Wednesday.
Yeah.
I know I had to slip away from work myself because I have a day job too.
Yeah.
So maybe
that's a really good point, and we'll figure out a different way to have it, later in the evening or earlier in the morning, for people that work shift work. So that's a great observation. Thanks. And it is, you're just raising something. Okay. I think that's it. Thank you very much for coming out and for all your input. It's really, really helpful and very much appreciated. And hopefully we'll see you at the next one or stay in touch with us. Thank you.